Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston from Our Blooming Catholic Life. I hope you're having a blessed day. Now this show is going to be a little bit of a special request. We had one of our viewers ask us about Lectio Divina. They wanted me to go into it a little bit more, so I hope this is what she was looking for. Now just last week we were also talking about praying the rosary, right? And whether it's the Franciscan crown or the regular rosary, you can say it different ways. So you can start out just saying the prayers on the beads, and some people that really resonates with, and some people it doesn't. So the rosary was never meant to just be prayers on beads. It's like stained glass windows in cathedrals. And a lot of modern ones, they've gotten rid of the pictures and they just have like pretty colors and stuff, or some of the pictures are a little whack in my mind. They were originally meant to be beautiful representations of spiritual truths. And some of them were a bit more complex theologically, right? But some of them were very simple pictures that anybody looking at it, you're like, oh, there's Jesus as a lamb. Or, they would even have words sometimes at the bottom to tell you what saint it was. And there might be symbols, and people could learn to read the symbols. Like if a saint was holding a lily, it meant they were a virgin. So you could very easily grasp just one or two even symbols in any stained glass window, and you'd instantly be able to meditate on that saint or know things about them, right? It's like that with the rosary. So the rosary is a way to talk with Mary and Jesus about events in Jesus's life, right? And so you can do the very simple way. A lot of people get a lot of benefit out of it, just saying the prayers. My grandmother was one of those. She tended to just say the prayers, or that's what she told us. I don't know. But I know she was a very faithful woman. She never really talked theology with me, but she did pray the rosary every day. I've heard of some really ambitious grandmas praying the rosary every day for every single grandchild. And what a blessing that is, friends. But she got great devotion and love just speaking the prayers. And I think that's somebody with a very deep relationship with Mary who is able to do that, right? A lot of us still need aids. We need those picture aids like the stained glass windows. And so as we're going through, we don't just say the mystery, like say the finding of the child Jesus in the temple. We may say a small scriptural verse that goes with it that would help us. Some people then, if you need more help, you can go to a longer passage and a picture to help you enter into that mystery. And then you could have that picture or that scripture verse that you would look at as you're saying the Our Fathers and the Hail Marys. And that would help you to meditate on the life of Christ. You can imagine yourself in it. So that's one way to do it, is you can, if you have that picture, imagine you're somewhere in that scene. You could pick to be one of the characters that was there. Like in the Adoration by the Magi, you could imagine that you were one of the Magi who came upon Mary and baby Jesus, right? And you'd been following the star and how great your joy is in finding Jesus. Or you could pretend that you're Mary, right? And that you're just sitting there taking care of your baby, and suddenly these men show up at the door, these strange men, and they want to adore your child and acknowledge him as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And how amazing that is for you. And you can meditate. You can enter into the picture. You could be a bystander, right? You could have been a neighbor who saw them go by and you're like, oh, what's going on? So you can even make up your own character. Now, it's not scripturally based anymore, right? But there was probably a neighbor or somebody who saw them going at some point. And so it's fairly reasonable. You're not creating a new theology. You're just helping yourself to enter into the mystery. If you have the scriptures, sometimes, though, a way to do it, excuse me for a second. So if you have the verse for the rosary, you could do something called Lectio Divina. And this is why some people, it could take them days, weeks, or even a month to get through a rosary if they're stopping and doing a deep Lectio Divina on each of the mysteries. And that's okay. So Lectio Divina is called, it just means divine reading. And it has 4 steps in its original form. Read, meditate, contemplate, and pray. So the monastic process of this was formalized in the 6th century by Benedict of Nursia, and then the 4-step process itself was done by some Carthusian monk in the 12th century. So the 4-step method. So when you read it, you literally are reading it. You're listening to the word. In the next one, you're going to meditate in on a little bit, which may include maybe you're reading it a second time and jotting down some notes, a word or a phrase that jumped out at you. And you'll do that for a little bit. And then when you are ready to enter into contemplation, fun fact, you can't necessarily do contemplation yourself, but what you can do is a nice quiet. It's when you're listening for the response from God. And the last step is your response back to God for whatever insight he gave you. You can be like, oh, Holy Father, thank you for opening my eyes to this moment in your life. I see how maybe I could do this in my life differently now that I know that, which is what's led people to adding a fifth step. The fifth step is a commitment to act in some way. So say you read about the adoration of the Magi and you were moved. You want that awe, that right, that the shepherds had when they came in with the awe, that the Magi came when they saw the baby Jesus. You want that awe, that fear of the Lord. You want that amazing experience. You want to be overwhelmed by the presence of the Lord. And so you might say, I need to encounter the Lord more. So maybe you're going to start going to daily mass. Maybe you're going to take an hour at an adoration chapel. Maybe you want to encounter God more in that poor little child. So maybe you're going to work at a pregnancy center. So you're going to make some kind of a commitment to an action. Now, here's the thing. How do you keep accountable? That's why it's sometimes good to do Lectio Divina in a group, because then you're going to have an accountability group. Say what your action is, write it down. Don't just think it. Even if you're not going to have an accountability group, write it down. You're going to find that you're much more accountable when you write things down. Now, this 5-step method has been popularized by Jeff Cavins. So if you really want to get started in Lectio, this is a great way I've found to do it. His Walking Towards Eternity set, there's actually 3 books. Your third book may or may not look like mine. This is a notebook I picked up at the grocery store. His last one was an Adobe PDF file, and the videos were online. He did it at the beginning of this COVID crisis. And that one was called Walking Towards Eternity, Making Choices for Today. It was the special edition during the coronavirus quarantine by Jeff and Emily Cavins. And so you may still be able to find that online. They made it very cheap. That one was only $7 because you had to write your own book. And I did. I wrote out all the steps just like it was because I already had this. So I kind of knew what I wanted mine to look at. And so it's kind of nice if you do the Walking Towards Eternity because he has a bookmark that reminds you of the steps. So he has them both by a Latin name and an English name. So the first step is read or Lectio. The second step, meditate or meditatio. This one has pray or oratio and then contemplate or contemplio. So this one, you would slowly read the verse or verses looking for details, noticing key words or verbs, things that are repeated, compared or contrasted. The next one is meditatio, where you mentally chew on the key words. And the next one, then you would pray, connecting your life to it. So I sometimes flip it, but they have the pray as the next one, the oratio. And then the last one they have is contemplate, just savor being in God's presence. And so I know in Walking with Eternity, they encourage you, even if you do this in a group, don't do it in a group, whatever, to go and spend time in adoration when you're done. So that's a great way to have the contemplation step towards the end. And then while you're contemplating God, just enjoying being in his presence, you're going to resolve to act, and they call that operatio. Make a practical resolution, and you're going to write it down. And there is a spot here in the book where you not only write down what you're going to do, so you kind of write down a general idea, and then you come up with an actual action item, and you're going to write down a day and time that you're going to do it. And when you go to the next week, he's going to hold you accountable. And if you do it in a small group, your small group leader they don't have to ask the specifics, but they can say, did you do your operatio? Did you do your action? And you should be able to say yes or no. Then there's a little bit different things in here as well. So how do you do Lectio Divina in a group? That's a different question. So when I do it myself, I read the passage and then I spend time with it, right? And I might write down keywords or phrases. I might read it several times. You know me, folks. I'm drawing pictures. You know my notebooks are full of pictures. Sorry, they're over here. These bad boys don't end up in this crazy bad shape by not drawing pictures. So I write down words and pictures, and normally they're little sketches, and then eventually you can see like there's a lot of scratches and stuff, and then eventually I end up with a cohesive picture, but it doesn't start out as a cohesive image. And that's why you're meditating. You're really going into it more deeply, and eventually you should almost feel like you lose sense of time and place, and then you kind of know that you're really into it, right? So doing it by myself, I do it a little bit differently than I've heard of to do it a group, but you can also do it individually as a group. You're like, wait, what? So one way of doing it, yes, is to read the passage. Just make little notes of what stands out to you, whether in picture form or written form. And then as it goes on, like give yourself 5-10 minutes. And when you feel it's exhausted, or a set time that you've all agreed on, somebody else would read it. And so I normally catch words are very small images in the first one. The second one, it might be a larger piece, or maybe only one of those from the first set jumps out at me. And then you might read it a third time, and some people just rest in that third moment. For me, that's when I start pulling it all together into one cohesive thought. So when you do it as a group, though, that's one way of doing it. You can all do it that way. And then a couple minutes after the third reading, you say, would anybody like to share? There's another way to do it, though. I kind of find this way really interesting, but I can't usually find people who are willing to do it. It's a little bit more vulnerable, so it's a little scary for some people, I think. And so in this method, when you do it, you pick 3 readers. You say, it's going to be every 5 minutes, right? And then what you do, though, after they read the passage, people have their eyes closed. They're not looking at. Sometimes people each like to have the Bible verse open, whether it's on their phone app or a Bible, or they have like 5 different translations going. Whatever you're doing, one way to do it, and I'm just saying this is one way. I like to just have one reader sometimes. One reader, one translation. Okay? And then I'm going to have that person set a timer. It's going to be like read, set a timer for 5 minutes, read, set a timer for 5 minutes, read, set a timer for 5 minutes, kind of thing. And so that person is going to be responsible that week. They're going to rotate out. Don't worry. We're going to do, somebody else is going to do it next week. So when they read the passage, I want people to sit and listen with their eyes closed. And as they're listening to the passage, even over top of the person who's reading it, it's okay. The first time, don't shout anything out until they're done reading it. But when they're done reading it the first time, you may be like, oh, peace, kingdom. The words that are jumping out to you, share them, because it's a different experience. Now you're doing it together as a group, not separately as a group. In the first one where you only share your answers at the end. In this one, you're doing it together as a group. And sometimes you get insights from others, or words that jump out at them aren't what's jumping out at you, but you're a community, and it's a totally different experience to do it as a community, as a group, and come up with a group thought on it. And maybe you come up with a group project at the end. Is very interesting and very different dynamic. Now, does that mean that whatever you got out of that is 100? Awesome, you're a new theologian, you can come up with a new theory about Christ. No, like you would still take it, it's still something that you could take to a spiritual director. It still needs to be true to Christian theology, right? You couldn't come up with like a tree is God or something. That's not what I'm saying. You're meditating on the word of Christ and trying to go deeper into your Christian faith. And so I use it. I find that I do go deeper. I find that sometimes I come up with an action item and sometimes I don't. And I'm okay with that. But maybe you're not. Maybe you would want that more often. And I would like to mention for those secular Franciscans who are watching, sorry, I keep picking up my notebook and looking at old Lexios. Because it is something that's a beautiful, beautiful practice. A lot of people do it. The monks, when they were doing it, might have been doing it while they were doing Office of the Readings. It's also appropriate as you get to help you prepare yourself for Mass. You could do it with the readings for that Mass, especially for Sunday Mass. You could do it earlier in the week. Or on Sunday morning or something before you go and sit and do a Lectio on that day's readings. That's particularly profitable because the priest is going to give a homily and teach you more about that reading, so you know you're on the right track, right? And you can always talk to him about it because he's just taught on it. So it's a great way to do it. Another great practice is to do it on first Saturdays. Remember, you're supposed to meditate for 15 minutes on one of the mysteries of the Rosary. So you can do, like we talked about in our video, I'm going to try and link it up here, the Mystery of the Month Club. You could do Lectio on one of the mysteries for an entire month. You could just do it that one Saturday, or you could do it like every Saturday that month, or you could go back to it throughout the month and do it. So yeah, I hope that answers questions on Lectio Divina. It's divine reading. It's a way of meditating on the scriptures. And just like on the Rosary, you can always go a little bit deeper, a little bit more deeply. Like stained glass windows, Rosary, Lectio Divina, they're all ways to open a conversation with God. And that's where we get into the contemplatio. So sometimes you might be just resting in the Lord, but sometimes you may get some words from him, and I wouldn't really say words. You get a feeling of what he's trying to say to you. And that may or may not happen. Contemplation is like a gift from God. The meditation and sitting in adoration, it kind of opens up your heart. It opens up your soul just a little bit to be receptive. Like they talk about at confirmation, right? You want your soul to be a little bit open so those gifts of the Holy Spirit that you were given at your baptism have some room to grow and bloom. And so that's what you're doing. Lectio Divina is a way, it's divine reading, but you're really spending time with the Lord as you would with your beloved. If you really like someone or you love them, whether it's your grandmother, a boyfriend, whatever, spending more and more time with them, you're developing that relationship, and you can hear them better. You understand them better, right? So that's what you're trying to do, is understand and hear the Lord better. And so eventually, as you do this, when you go into the chapel for your contemplation piece, or maybe it's a home shrine you're sitting at, wherever, that you're able to sit and listen and just be open to what the Lord is trying to do in your life. Now, when St. Clare did that, remember her contemplio was called gaze. She gazed at Christ. And she would gaze possibly at the passage in light of Christ. Did her life reflect this passage, this moment of Christ? Remember, we're made in the image and likeness of God. And an icon, if you've ever seen an icon, is one image. It's one moment in someone's life. So you may have one saint, but many different images of them, icons of them, that each have a different name because they're each reflecting something unique about that moment of that saint's life, a particular characteristic or a time or how they listen to God in that moment. And so we can be like that. We can have many different facets to our relationship with God, right? And so when we do this, we look at that passage and we're like, how does my life reflect this passage that happened in the Bible, right? So it's a little bit deeper way. And so you may come to a different action note if you do that. You may say, hey, I'm really living out this passage, and that could be really good. It could also be really horrible depending on which character you are in it, right? So meditation is like opening a conversation with God. You're not just meditating. You're not just thinking about him. You're opening your mind so that you're able to hear him and what he is trying to do in your life. I'm trying to say this many different ways, but say the same thing. And I hope you're getting that, because it's a dialogue, right? So like when we pray in it, we're praying back. So we're meditating the word, we're hearing the word, we're meditating on it, and we're being open then, and we're praying and we're saying, okay, Lord, how do you want me? How do you want me to respond to this? And we listen for his answer in contemplio. And then we try and move on that. So we're listening for his answer, but then our answer back to his answer is going to probably be an action. It could be a change in our life. It could be a one and done deal. We don't know until you start meditating. And so it's a conversation with God, just like the Rosary, just like those stained glass windows. They are conversations. They are conversations with the beloved that help you understand. They're true dialogues where you speak and they speak. You speak and God is speaking. And you speak and God speaks. And you act and God acts. and God acts and you act. So it's going back and forth until we become in a more perfect union. And I think that it's a great practice for this time, because right now, between COVID-19 and people struggling with what is the role of government, can government really keep us in our houses like this? And then bam, we hit some racial tensions out of nowhere, kind of. And so there's people, the same people who said you have to stay in your home for safety are a lot of the same people who are out protesting in large groups. And we're kind of confused, and we get their hurt and pain, but we don't think they're going about it the right way. Or you're really hurt and in pain, and you're like, why are people telling me to stay home? I'm hurting in pain. And so at some point we have to respond to each other by both talking and listening, so that we're able to form a dialogue. And don't just have that dialogue with one person. You need to open it up to the whole community. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in the case of Lectio Divina. But in our case, you're going to probably need to talk to multiple people with differing opinions. And so I hope this helps you, that you learn to meditate and how it relates to dialogue and how to spend time in conversation with God, that we can come more into community and union. God bless, friends.